going to talk about some firearms industry dirt with my old friend Lou Reich. Lou, who has worked in the firearms industry for over a decade, dealing with the retail, started off behind a gun counter, and now is working for an unnamed distributor in the industry. But we always keep in touch. He actually worked at RCS a number of years ago. Was a Cleveland boy for a hot minute, so we were frequently we'll catch up on the phone and talk shop about what we're seeing out there in the industry. And finally, it seemed like the right time to just say, hey, we should record one of these conversations. And especially right now, because we're on the tail end of SHOT Show, and so we've seen all the press releases, we've seen the action that's coming off the show floors, and we're going to do a little bit of a look back into for in 2023, and then also looking ahead, maybe make some predictions about what 2025 might hold in store for both retailers and consumers in the firearms industries. I guess beginning at the beginning, Lou, you're as a rep on the phone and walking in and out of retailers on a regular basis. So what would you kind of summarize 20 sales performance like for the industry from what you've seen in your territory?
I would say that the demand has not gone away. The means have gone away. I mean, the economy has hit everybody. I mean, I can look at everyone that's on this call, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, can look at their grocery store bill or their gas bill, or, if you have a Costco membership, any of that stuff, and know that you just more of your free money is being siphoned off to essential items. And so I think that's the number one hindrance is not that the industry has done anything necessarily poorly. If anything, I think the industry honestly has grown. If you look at what 2020 did and how wild of a year that was, I think everyone that was of age to buy firearms that was on the fence picked a side. They're either lighting my car on fire outside of my condo in my gentrifying neighborhood, and I think I need a gun, and the coexist bumper sticker didn't do enough. Or you went to the other side of the fence and you're like, I'm not loving them or hearing their story enough with enough love in my heart. And so I'm not going to get a gun. But those two sides of the fence were kind of picked. So there are more gun owners now in America to appeal to sell stuff to. They just don't have any money.
Yeah, I
And
think
like, it's kind of like I tell people I'm always in the market for a private jet. The only thing that stops me is this is the money to buy and maintain one. It's not the desire or the want or the fact it would make my life easier. It's just I can't afford it. And it's not like, it's not like the old, like, you'll hear some firearms blogs. It's like you can afford whatever you want to. It's like not where I'm shopping, my man. Yeah,
yeah,
maybe in the Glock optics department, but not in the things that I enjoy.
I think also depending on what your interest in the firearms realm is affects your frame of reference, because if you're a handgun shooter, like you mentioned, optics are a great example where it's like you're putting an acro on a pistol is probably one of the more expensive investments you're going to make. Yeah, your optic and your weapon light, and beyond that, there's not a whole like that kind of maxes out. You can spend more on a piece of glass for a precision long range rifle than you could on your entire handgun collection if you were really being diligent about it.
Thanks, Chuck. Thank you. That was a judicious financial purchase.
Yeah, and that's without getting into night vision and lasers and all of the other accessories that can really run the price tag up. But I think that like it's an interesting snapshot of where people are, both household income wise as well as consumer credit availability as it is right now. I'm looking at the general economic figures, and they're saying that the percentages of Americans that are at or approaching their credit card limits and have been carrying a balance for greater than 6 months is higher than it's been in almost a decade. And it's when you consider what that is, a downstream reflection of all that inflation and some of the artificial price increases that were just a byproduct in the firearms industry of the pandemic time period. Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there holding a lot of cool gear and trying to figure out how they're going to make their truck payment next month.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you should not be buying guns on your credit cards, guys. Just, my one piece of financial advice I'll throw out there. But other than that, you're right. There's just not as many dollars, and the competition for those dollars have never been stiffer.
Yeah.
Um, so that's, I think, and the other thing is that is quintessentially true about the gun industry, and I'll argue this with anybody, anywhere. The white collar gun owner that, you know, people talk about, like, I want to open a gun store that appeals to rich guys. I want my gun store to look like a golf pro shop. That customer does not exist in mass in anywhere. I've been all over the country. I've seen it. There are areas where you can find more of them. Houston, Atlanta, Nashville. You have some really, really nice high-end retailers there. I mean, Chris Barrett owns a gun store in Nashville, and you can walk into, it's actually in Murfreesboro, but you can walk into that and you see a lot of cool stuff. But a lot of that's the product that Chris Barrett owns. It's not really that the market supports 7 MRADs and, 25 Night Force optics in the store. Part of, at the end of the day, Chris Barrett owns it. And so, it's a blue collar consumer base, whether it be like guys in the military, like when I was in the Marines and I was working behind a gun counter to buy, an aim point. I remember I still have the very first T1 that I ever bought. I have the very first BCM upper I ever bought. And those were several paycheck items that I got when I was a Lance Corporal or a PFC. And so that's really your customer base. You need to think of your customer base as someone who's not necessarily a junior, like a private or like an E3 or E4, but really kind of that E6 to E7 income range is what most of your customers are. And so that's where the industry should be appealing to. So it's always weird when I see someone in the firearms industry, they're rich people that like it, but there comes a point where, for most people, I'm not talking about the Chucks of the world, people like that who are shooting in their civilian life to support a very unique professional experience. For most people, there are cops that are that are doing this. I know a lot of guys that are working in small departments who do this. So I'm not taking away from the dudes who do it for a living and the very concerned citizens. That's not what funds our industry. I'm sorry. It's not serious users. I have a buddy of mine at Fort Bragg right now. He and I were talking last night, and he's like, man, I wish companies weren't so focused on like swag. And I was like, bro, that's what pays for the party. I was like, drop merch t-shirts. It is a massive cash influx to these companies to do R&D work.
Yeah,
and he's been in the Army since he was 18. He started at 3rd Bat, and now he's at Fort Bragg doing stuff. And he and I were talking, and he's like, man, it just seems like they're appealing to all these people. I was like, yeah, I met the owner of Patagonia like 20 years ago, and he told me what pays for the whole party are the $35 Patagonia hats that he's selling college stuff. We're not making a living selling $700 raincoats, and this was in 2004.
Well, it's the, whether you're talking about a restaurant where it's like the restaurant was only serving food to get you to buy a glass of wine, right? Because that's where their profit's stored. And if you walk into a gun store, the brand new, Glocks in the display case aren't where the profit is. It's all the other merchandise, the ammo, the accessories, the cleaning kits, the holsters, the rifle slings. That's where the margins are supposed to be extracted, because nobody's really getting rich selling the guns themselves. And I think that, I started before RCS was RCS. We were a tactical gear dealer that went from gun show to gun show every weekend. And so I saw and heard all these old boomers talking for years about how the gun shows had been ruined by the internet, because now everybody thinks they can get something cheaper someplace else. And I look at it and I think, even back then, the realization was that everybody has this notion of that one time they got a really, really killer deal on one thing. And they think that that should be the real price they pay for everything that they get. And it's at this point, I think we're seeing now that the gun stores that relied on turning and burning commodities at a 7% markup just to get them through, and when the demand started to fall off because the customers were running out of money, because we sold 10 years worth of product in a span of 36 months during COVID, now we're paying the other side of that, which is like all of a sudden everyone's having to learn how to sell things with maybe a little higher price tag to maybe a slightly smaller audience in order to cover their nut. Like generally speaking, the contrast from 2024 to the 3 years preceding it, from my view of it as a manufacturer, it looks like everybody is there are companies that are doing better than others. There always is in the market, but like even the companies that are doing better, significantly better than the other companies, everybody's kind of down from where they were in the 2 to 3 years preceding. And I think you and I've discussed this before. There's been kind of a feeling that during the pandemic, it was a panic boom that lasted so long that a lot of people believed that it was just the new normal, that it was going to be that way from now on, and changed their buying habits, changed their business plan to reflect that. And it was maybe a short-sighted decision to do so.
I mean, I'm friends with a lot of my customers on social media, and you can kind of see it. There's just a realm, like, let's be honest, the gun industry is going to offer you a 7 to 11% return at the retail market. So you got to do a ton of stuff. I mean, I was approached by some guys from Raymond James in Atlanta that there were some dudes that work there, and they wanted a gun store, and they wanted the nice, luxury gun store. And I told them, I'm like, these are the profit margins you can expect. I was like, how about you just go back and put your money somewhere else? I mean, I turned them down because I'm like, there's no way that you give me all this money and I ever give you, like, in any circumstance, I give you enough to make you happy, much less pay myself. So, I mean, if you're not out there with accessories, and I tell guys, and I have a lot of stores that understand this. If you're buying a $500 Glock, to make money off that, you need to turn that into a $1,500 sale. And the manufacturers are doing the most to cut out the biggest part of that sale, which is the optic. I mean, not saying that they're maliciously doing it, but the common, I mean, Fisher said it years ago, like, we are going to a point where guns just come with red dots. And I'll go find the podcast, because it was probably, I want to say 2017, when he was just like, you will see it. And we've seen it. Like, Glock is now, Glock and Aimpoint have married, and OEM, like, you're not going to, like, I think in a year, the only Glock that's going to come non-MOS is the 19 Gen 3 and the 17 Gen 3. For whatever remaining contracts, wherever they have, I think after that, everything's going to MOS system, or everything's going to their new COA or COA or whatever, however they pronounce it. I haven't even told anybody the exact pronunciation, but the days of iron sights on guns, it's a bad day to be a tritium night sight salesman. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, there's a lot of products that I imagine are going to, if not in the near term, over the coming few years, start to look more like buggy whips and lamp oil in the market as far as their utility goes. And that's the thing, is like, you look backward, and we have such a snapshot that I posted about it on our Instagram, like around the election time, that I was like, it doesn't matter what your political views are on what administration occupies the White House. What is worth talking about is the fact that COVID happened in 2020 and kind of erased everyone's memory of what the firearms industry was like from 2016 till 2020, because it's like there was this whole thing called the Trump slump that happened, that was the direct result of the fact that everybody in the industry, especially in the consumer space, just kind of decided, well, I don't have the same sense of need to buy these things, because there doesn't seem to be any pending sense of legislation that's going to take any of this stuff away from me. And so we watched people kind of allocate money that they would have spent on guns or ammo or things like that on other household items. And now we're at a point where, because things were such a boom from 2020 to about 2023, people forgotten what it was like before, and just how bad it was, and just how many companies were going out of business then. And I think we're potentially staring another kind of die off here in the face very soon from a lot of companies in the industry.
Yes, but I will counter that with a couple of things. Two of my biggest customers came to rise in the Trump slump. What we had different in the Trump slump is we had a robust economy. So the enthusiast was still able to purchase what they wanted. So when I was working at a gun shop during the Trump slump, and especially when I still had friends at the Trump slump, what you were selling bottom of the barrel stuff, and then mid and high tier stuff. Q came out during the Trump slump. You couldn't get Q stuff for like 2 years. I remember my RSR rep would call me and be like, I have this from Q. I'm like, I don't care what it is. Send it. Like, I don't care if it's whatever, direct thread, QD, rifle, 3-hour blackout, 6.5, I'll sell it to someone. Big techs. one of my customers now who has merged from e-commerce to retail gun range to manufacturing and is juggling all four of those balls really well. I mean, he crushed it during the Trump stuff. That's when he gained all this territory. And then like when COVID happened, he already had this I had this Rolodex of people to go through that like he was their go-to guy. And the economy shrinking has hurt absolutely everyone. I mean, obviously the great titan in the industry, everyone in our space looks up to is Magpul.
Yep.
I'm not saying that Magpul's in danger. I'm just saying they're probably looking like, damn, 1022 stocks ain't selling like they used to. Because 1022s aren't selling like they used to. I mean, that's a gun that is not like, no one runs in fear for their life to purchase a 1022. They buy it for their kid. They buy it as a fun gun for themselves. I was selling 40 1022s a month, now like 10. The pond is just shrinking and that kind of stuff. So I think you're right. Everyone's hurting. Some people are, John Knive's Scrooge McDuck gold pile may not be as close to the diving board as he once was, but he ain't getting hurt when he's diving into it. So from that quote comes from my head. Like,
well, and that's a tangent worth taking for a moment, because I think it speaks to, is if we were going to glance ahead at something I believe is an indicator of future trends, because Magpul has always been one of those brands that if they weren't at the absolute bleeding edge, they were certainly up at the front of the line cutting brush. And that is that the partnership with Ruger on the new handgun, everybody on the internet has an opinion about it. Some are...
And mine's the only right.
Right, yeah. But from a business perspective, I think
genius.
We are watching, like, this is a real indicator of some of the path to future success for companies in the industry, is to do collaborations and these joint projects together, because there's the benefit of, like you said, that you're tapping two audiences, not one, and you're tapping companies for their respective resources. So
I'll kind of sum that up. I was really excited to see that, because one thing that's cut into my business is the fact the patent on the Gen 3 Glock went away. And without risk, Ruger has had a hard time gaining a foothold into the polymer pistol market. They've had several iterations of guns. They had the Security, the American, and I'm not saying they were bad in their own right. They just didn't capture that aesthetic that you, Nick, and I have talked about. Like, things have to be good looking. And they went to the guys that really make stuff look good. And that's Magpul there is a reason that we're drawn to the Magpul booth and not, let's say, the other, not to badmouth anyway. There are other polymer manufacturers from overseas that make stuff that we look at booth and we're like, yeah. But everyone wants to run through the Magpul booth and see, and they kind of have this magic touch on everything. Like we were talking before the recording, the DACA rifle pouch. You may not like it, like as the high speed consumer who's only concerned with what like tier one guys are doing, and you're cloning plate carrier setups of people you've never met. And you may not be happy that like they didn't give you some like whiz bang item, but like, again, try walking with your AR-15 into an indoor gun range without it in a rifle case and see what kind of warm response you get from the room temperature IQ person, i.e. me, behind the counter when you just walk in with a gun. It's not good. They've hit it. They've tapped a market, but there was a huge market of people cloning the Gen 3 Glock, and I don't think any of it really hit. None of it really did such a great job that the RXM is. I mean, Ruger's distribution market is massive. To the casual user not in the industry, I just don't think you realize that even more than maybe Glock. And again, this is not bashing Glock. Ruger is in every gun store in America. It is a synonymous brand. The Ruger American Gen 2 hunting rifle is the item to have right now. And that hunting rifle is crushing. That gun, again, I was mentioning my buddy before, Brad, he's a big hunter, big competitive precision rifle shooter, served as a sniper in the Ranger Bat. He hunts with a Ruger American. He's got enough financial means to go buy whatever he wants. He hunts with a Ruger American 7PR. And, that gun that brand hits almost everything. And now with the RXM, it hits everything. And if Magpul can keep accessory support up for it, and I'm sure you'll see Radian come out with a comp for it, or one of those companies, Bulker Mountain Machine, it's going to give an option. I mean, yes, to me, who buys a gun like this, it may not be what I'm looking for, but there's somebody right now, especially in a rest economy, there are a lot worse guns you could get for $429
Yeah.
that are red dot cut, that have sights on them, that out of the box will fit in a ton of different holsters. I mean, that's the other thing. If you go for like a wonky Saturday Night Special polymer gun that's either from Turkey or made by one of these other companies, like good luck finding anything besides an Uncle Mike's or a universal holster that's just not fun. Now,
Yeah.
I've got a slew of, Glock 19 holsters from my time there, from just buying Glock 19 holsters throughout the years. If someone with an RXM can come to my garage and have a holster, where if you come with some other wonky nonsense, I can't help.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the brand strength is worth talking about from the Magpul side of it, where Magpul has always been kind of the cool kid, and their brand has evolved over the years. It certainly doesn't, the brand doesn't have the same vibe to it that it did in, say, 2008, 2010, 2020. Like it is progressively evolved as the people at the company have changed, but at the core, it's still the name out there that's like it somehow manages to be cool while even selling a mass market product, right? A lot of times the cool brands have to be they remain cool by being very hard to obtain and very, very premium priced. And so you take a product line like Magpul stuff, it ends up being kind of a mid-range price in many of the categories, but somehow manages to be the coolest option even when held up against some of the other more expensive products that it's competing with, which is, again, from a marketing guy's perspective, a pretty impressive display of brand and equity and kind of like that messaging that they've been doing over the years. I would say when I look at from our conversations with our distribution partners and with our dealer network that of the products out there now, it's funny because Magpul's brand also takes the most flack because it's almost like they're expected to completely revolutionize the firearms industry every year in SHOT Show. And I don't know where that expectation got started, but it's funny because like we were talking before we started the recording that there's people complaining about there being a bag line, and at the same time, no one's talking about a revolutionary new, sighting system that is also in the same battery of press releases that they put out. Somehow that gets overlooked, but somebody wants to dunk on the fact that they did the partnership with Ruger or that they're releasing the more DACA line
And
options.
something has to pay for the part. I'm buying, like that backpack that came out. Like I live at the beach, so a highly water resistant, sand resistant backpack that I can throw on the boat, and if it rains, like the towels and my t-shirt and stuff stays dry in it. It doesn't look like something that's covered in Molly and like I'm about to, make the third push into Fallujah. That's really appealing.
Yeah.
Like, I can get that in black and nobody's going to bat an eye when I walk into the beach bar with it and set it down by the door. No one's going to think like, wow, there's a bunch of gun stuff in there. And that's the other thing is like Magpul, I feel like for a couple of years has been pressing at the seams, not only to excel in the gun industry, which they do very well, but break into other markets, especially the outdoor market. Everyone talks about how big SHOT Show is. I mean, outdoor retailer, it used to be in Denver. It may be in Salt Lake now. I don't know where it is. I mean,
I think it's Salt Lake.
I don't keep up with it, but it's also huge. There are no federal regulations on the outdoor industry, like there are certainly on the gun industry. So, I mean, Magpul's making some plays to do some cool stuff in different directions. And the other thing is that no matter what anybody tells you in the current economy, you're far more likely to go buy in $100 or $150 rifle bag than you are to go buy, whatever like super cool thing that you were expecting. Like we all like to look at it. I do too. I mean, I love going to the B.E. Myers booth and looking at range finders that cost more than, project trucks. Like that stuff's fun. I get it.
Yeah.
That's why we go to SHOT Show. But, it's just not realistic for a company to be well balanced. So yeah, I think people expect innovation, and like what we were talking about before we started recording it, what is rewarded is the execution of core competencies. I mentioned Big Techs earlier, and Rooftop Defense is another one of my customers. What helped them grow in the Trump slump was the execution of customer service and core competencies and giving you a reason to go back. When UPS, the multi-billion-dollar company, screws up your order, you got a human being who was willing to fix it at their expense so that your customer experience was not disturbed. I mean, there are plenty of internet, uh, there are plenty of internet testimonials to both those companies. Actually, a friend of mine that works for the New York Times just went out to interview Solomon, because when he got an order messed up at like 10 p.m. on a Friday, he got an email like, "Hey, this is Solomon, own Rooftop Defense. Will you please reach out to me and talk to me? We have trouble with your order." And that kind of customer service doesn't exist really outside of
I
the gun
remember when you
industry.
were working at RCS still, and Scott Wilson and you and I were sitting around discussing Zappos, the shoe company website, and the degree of their customer service, and the fact that, their kind of corporate ethos had been that they were entirely driven based off of lifetime value of customer rather than on any individual transaction. And so you have to be willing to lose in the short term to potentially gain in the long term, but the gain in the long term is so significant when you build that kind of loyalty with your customer, because they know that it's costing you to take care of them and that you're doing it in spite of it. And, for the right customer in particular, not all customers really have this internal monologue, but like for the right customer, they see that and then they're willing to pay whatever your price is to have your service moving forward. It becomes less about whatever product they're buying, and they're going to come look on your site or in your store for it and buy whatever the equivalent thing you might have is, just because it's from you, rather than I want this brand of rifle or this brand of pouch for my rifle mags or whatever. Yeah, it's something that's funny that, like, you look back at what years were you at RCS again? Like 2015, 2014,
Through 2017.
2017. Like that time period, I mean, I think Zappos got absorbed by one of the other big e-commerce giants out there too, but it's like the fact that we were discussing it back then, and now you see the companies that are having success in our industry now are replicating those behaviors, where it's the very consumer focused, lifetime value oriented decisions. I think it's impressive that there's a lesson there for everybody else that's trying to make a play in the gun industry.
And it's hard. It's hard. I mean, the other thing is, it's very easy to look at the success stories and not remember the work it took to get there. I'm sure that if you go back to, whenever big tech started or whenever Rooftop started, I mean, Rooftop burned to the ground and he had to completely start over. And the fact that he's bounced back from that is, Solomon bounced back from that is miraculous. And there are a lot of ungrateful customers, but the overall overarching experience, I think, is the testament to the fact they're both, still thriving in the business, or making it in the business, is that kind of stuff pays off, but it's rough. The internet is a double-edged sword, where it's very cheap to have an opinion on the internet. It's very hard to start a business. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that working in the SHOT Show booth for Raven was, there was this guy that came up like out of nowhere, and we were right next to the Winkler booth, because I'll never forget this, because this was the most talented person that no one's ever heard of in the tactical industry. Because he stops by, like, I'm standing in the booth, it's me and I think like Babika and like maybe one other person, I don't know. And he's like, hey, and he like hits me on the chest, and I'm like, what's up, man? What can I do for you? He's like, I make a holster just as good as this. And I was like, okay, cool. Thank you for establishing first and foremost that you're not a customer. So now I can talk to you however I want to. And like, it's only going to get worse if you find my boss. Like this, the higher you roll the ladder, the meaner people are going to be. And I was, yeah, the difference is we make 10,000 a month, motherfucker. Keep it moving. And he's like, smiles at me, and then walks over to fucking Daniel Winkler's booth. And Daniel Winkler was in the booth. And he's like, hey, I can forge knives just as good as these. And I'm like, wow, are you stopping by like every booth today? Can you inform us like, what was no shitting? Like, can I direct you to the top floor? Like at the time, Velocity was like right around the corner. And I was like, you should stop by Velocity and tell Nelson that you're a better seamstress than everyone that they have. Like, now I'm going to start making fucking suggestions. And so, like, everyone has a customer experience and interaction like that, but it's really few and far between. I mean, most of my like really good customers, because sometimes something goes wrong. Like, I'm not in the shipping business. I'm in the computer software. I make the guns go from this warehouse to this warehouse. We'll have pallets show up and have been destroyed, especially during COVID. UPS had a huge problem of people stealing stuff out of them. And some people would act like, hey, I could do anything about it. All I can do is fix it. And our company ate the loss. I mean, like we If it got stolen, we filed a report, we filed an insurance claim, and we sent you a new gun for free. So we're definitely losing a lot of money on this. And they're like, well, my customer was expecting it. And I'm like, I understand that. You know, unless your customer came into your store while in the midst of a rolling gun battle, I mean, I can't help. Like, so
And which, by the way, the only time I think that's ever really happened was when the LA shootout happened back in the early 90s when they had to go in and get the Barretts.
it's just, it wasn't even a real problem. And the good customers were like, okay, yeah, a pallet with $50,000 worth of merchandise got dropped on its end, and I'm going to sort through it and see what's good and what's not. And I'll send you a list and just get it fixed and shit back out of here. And it's like, okay. And then like I'm getting screamed at by somebody else about, either something we didn't have control over or an honest mistake or shipping times. And, so I think that everyone has those customer experience. It's just like sales. Sales is about rejection and how fast you recover from rejection to move on. Like, if you get, I've called people and they've been like, I hate your company. I hate you. Never call here again. It's like, I'll talk to you tomorrow at 11. And, it's like, and then you got to hang up the phone and pick up the phone and call somebody else, or you got to walk into the next store until you have some luck with somebody. And so now it was easy during COVID when people bought everything. I mean, I had customers that were buying $40,000 orders once a week or 2 to 3 times a week. We had the merchandise. They are out of business.
Yeah,
and it was,
it's funny to think about, like the way there was so much volume moving through, but it's like when those companies went out of business, did anybody even notice? Like, I mean, obviously you noticed as the sales rep that was selling them stuff, but like, you don't hear about the ones that go under usually.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the writing's on the wall. Like, it also becomes a certain point. It's like, if you don't have a core customer base, like for me and what I like, the X300 Ultra is a great litmus test for how good your gun store is. Because it's an expensive item. It's something that is not cheap. They are available lots of different places. You can get them other places. How many your store moves, and you don't have to buy them from me. You can buy them directly through Surefire. You can buy them from RSR, but like when I walk into a store, if they have like a Surefire display or they have like Safari Land stuff, they've probably cultivated a business above like sustenance level. Like the guy behind the counter, if I'm like, hey, what's the deal with this? And they're like, it's a lat, probably not going to go well. They're like, hey, man, that's like, the X300 Ultra, it's the pistol light to have. It's the one that most of the holsters fit. That's why we like it. But, there's some other options as well. Cloud Defense makes this. Streamlight makes this. If that's too expensive, we've got something else for you. Like, those are the guys that it may not be crushing it, but they are still succeeding. I go to Topher's shop for real all the time. He sold like 700 NFA items last year. Like, he's not open on Sundays. He opens up at noon. Like, he's selling 4 or 5, NFA items on a busy day and at least one every day. And so again, it's that core competency execution of knowing how to sell stuff. And then other people, can't sell any of them. And it's gun industry Darwinism at some point. Like,
there's an undercurrent. There's an undercurrent, I think, generally at the retail level where a lot of people, whether it's a manufacturer or a retailer, that get into the industry because they're gun guys. They're a consumer that is like, oh, this would be fun to have a business in this industry. And I mean, I can freely admit I was that. I started a business because I didn't want to pay retail for stuff. And I was like, I can get enough other people at the gun show to buy this that'll subsidize my hobby. And a lot of gun industry businesses have started that way. I know this from having firsthand conversations with other business owners, and it's like, yeah, that's a common thread. Where it gets interesting, though, is when you, in particular, in the retail space, start talking to from a vantage point, and I came from a corporate sales background before this, so like my lens on everything is from a sales and marketing perspective, and in particular from the fact that like I was at my employer's expense, given a considerable education that, they sent me to training courses all the time. I was required to complete certain milestones and things like that. You go into your average gun store, and I think that the counter staff are in most cases, and I'm going to speak in very broad generalizations, which means I'm going to offend some people just by saying it, but like your counter guys in most gun stores are gun guys. They're not hired because they're salespeople who happen to want to sell firearms and firearms accessories. They're gun guys first and foremost. They're hired either for their interest and not even for their knowledge sometimes, but for their interest in guns. And that's why, I mean, the common meme is gun store advice. You know, the guy behind the gun store counter is going to tell you some of the dumbest shit you've ever heard for advice on what gun you should buy, how you should set your rifle up, what kind of shotgun ammo you need to buy, all of that stuff. The reason the memes exist is because it's such a common occurrence. And the reason it's such a common occurrence is because you have these stores that are built around everyone just wanting to do something that's of interest to them, right? Like there's nobody, you know, my sales background was in office equipment. I didn't grow up with a deep abiding interest in copier machines. I just ended up selling them, right? But that's why like I had to be focused on the art of the sales process, less so on like my enthusiasm for a duplexing 60 page per minute copier. And the thing I'm seeing is every time I'm on the road for work, I pop into whatever gun store I'm in the town with to check out what their holster selection looks like, to see how they're merchandising the store. And it's like, you could almost make a prediction. I should write down the 10 indicators right on the list. Just like you said, one of the good indicators is like, do they have an X300 in their store? And do they have like a Surefire display? There are things where it's a tell right away when you walk in that this company, this retailer is built around the wrong attributes, and they might not go out of business, but they will struggle along. It'll be the longest distance between a business owner and the annual income of an assistant manager of a Ruby Tuesday. And it's like the difficulty is that I don't think there's a large awareness of the fact that like the consumers in this market, especially the new consumers, they're not getting the kind of the introduction. They're relying on the internet. Realistically, it's the Facebook groups and the Reddit threads and stuff like that to get their information, because they can't necessarily trust what they're going to be told in a lot of these retailers. And I know you and I both know stores where that isn't the case. We know that there are good gun stores out there, but you've seen plenty of them
They're
walking
few
in the
and
door.
far between. Like if you walk into and really like get a good selection and good selection of cool stuff and different types of ammo, and they put the time in to carry stuff that would be of interest of what I would say above ignorant consumer. Most gun stores approach selling guns like I imagine shiesty auto repair shops treat college girls. Like, how can I take you for the most money now? You know, the amount of guys I've seen, sell just trash to people, and they're good meaning people, and you only have to be taken advantage of once, and that's again, I think that's what opened the door. If you live in a town, like fortunately, where I live, I have guerrilla armament not too far away. If I need anything, I can go to Topher's and it's going to be sitting there. And the convenience factor of getting that as opposed to calling my own company and putting in an employee order and having it shipped and waiting for it versus like paying Topher $40 more to have the dopamine hit of getting it right now is a lot. So I think, I know Marines that shopped at Guerrilla Armament and they'll call me like 2 years later and I'm like, man, like, you see if Topher will ship this to me. Like I went to my local gun store. They don't have any. And I was like, yeah, dude, I told you. Like, I was like, buy it
Yeah.
all while you're there. And that's where Ike and Solomon like kind of really ramped up and captured that market. They knew a bunch of America was not going to drive to the store or had driven to the store and was so disappointed they were never going back. Slings are another thing. Do you have Vickers slings? Do you have Blue Force Gear slings on the wall? That, I mean, it may not be your sling du jour. I mean, now there's 50 different ones. There's, VTAC and, Dan Brokos has a sling, which I love. And, Edgar Sherman's design makes cool slings. But, if you have a Vickers sling, the other thing about the Vickers sling is you can get it from like 3 different distributors and you can call Blue Force Gear and do a dealer order. It doesn't take WASP or magic to get it. But, at least you're like, hey, your rifle should have something to help you shoot and attach it to your body. And so That's another good sign. RCS or Safari Land holster, another good sign. And so, if you're a real consumer and you go to the gun store a couple times, I mean, that's the other thing I don't think gun stores realize. It's like, I'm not going to ask you for it. Like when I walk around the store, if I want to see something, I'll ask to look at it. And if I like something, I'll try to buy it. And I try to buy something in every single gun store that I go into. And good Lord, have I bought a lot of PMags at MSRP. And so, that's kind of my go-to item. But I've been in gun stores where they didn't have PMags, where it's like, we don't have that mag full stuff. We have, polymer brand X. And you're like,
well, yeah, because I think
I buy like a Snickers bar or something.
there's a big struggle within they've got to get their certain number of turns on a certain number of dollars, right? Like at the end of the day, the SKUs are irrelevant. And this is actually part of why RCS has had almost 3 or 4 complete evolutions as far as how we've dealt with the dealer program. We pulled way back from dealers. We went real aggressive after them for a while, then we pulled way back, then we went back into it a little bit, but then we pulled back again. And part of the reason behind it was I got frustrated by the fact that you have some dealers who don't know how to move the product in general, and so there's nothing you can do to help them. And then on the other side of it, you have the people that are like, their competitive advantage is that they're like, I'm going to be the cheapest price in town, right? And it's always about selling. And neither of those are the successful place to put a good brand, which is why I get frustrated, because even if I have no problem paying, like you said, paying retail for a PMag, because I know the value of it. It's worth the retail price for it. And, if a retailer goes to the trouble of stocking and inventorying the items and having them there when I need them, well, yeah, they deserve the margin. What I get confused by is this idea that the competitive advantage is either the zip code or the price you have on your product, right? Where it's like, if your big claim to fame is like, I'm the only gun shop in this town, you're probably not set up for success, generally speaking, because being the only one is not, let's face it, you're competing with the whole internet at this point. So any product you have on your shelf.
Probably a reason. Like, I mean, unless like you're in a town that just found oil, I'm telling you, one of the most overlooked towns. I mean, there are huge gun stores out there in Midland and Odessa, Texas. Because guess what those dudes do when they get paid? I'm sure like some of the wildest gun collections imaginable are in Midland and Odessa, Texas.
I can see that. I mean, some people just have that tendency. They're allergic to cash. That's why they get rid of it as fast as they get it.
And, I mean, I agree that at some point you're just trading dollars, and that's not a sustainable business model. And I didn't go to Wharton, but I'm sure the people at Wharton would agree that, if you're looking to try to cut your margins to hairline and you think you can move enough, there are a couple people in this business that do it, but they are so, and even then the maintenance on everything else is going to catch up to you. Having an IT person it's no longer just you sitting there. I mean, making sure that your federal documents are all in line and ATF doesn't snatch your FFL away.
Yeah.
Hiring someone who's competent to do that. I mean, it starts to add up very quickly, and you realize that, everyone else is selling at 7%. I'm gonna sell at 3.5% and out punt them. There are not enough people buying. And the other thing I need to tell you, like I tell people, is like if you're at a gas station at a busy 4-way intersection, and there's a big sign that says buy one get one Coca-Cola, and you walk into the opposite gas station and you want a Coke, are you going to get back in traffic and drive? I mean, you're going to look at, no, you're not going to. And this is what I want to tell gun retailers. Look at where Uber Eats goes most of the time. I mean, I have friends that have Uber Eats or DoorDash, and they're like, I've gone to the jankiest places in the world. You think like I'm going to be in the suburbs. I'm going to be, taking stuff to these big houses. You can afford all this ridiculous, overcharges for cold, crappy food. Nope. It's going to the most prime. You're going to a trap house in East Atlanta. Like, get ready. You're about to meet Gucci Man that can't rap. And so what I tell people is like, people will pay for convenience, but you have to have, and like, depending on the size of your store, like what can you bear to keep that convenience? I mean, I love, shout outs to like Reptilia and Geisley and Unity and Badger Ordnance for making all these awesome optics mounts. I completely understand why the average gun store in America doesn't stock all 4 brands. I mean, that's a lot of money in optics mounts you're not selling a ton of optics to begin with. I mean, that's another indicator of just the level up. If you've got like all 4 of those scope mounts or even like Spur or something like that, it's like you're in a gun store that's got a lot of nice stuff. And again, you're looking at, now you are really in zip code math. You're in a Houston, you're in a Nashville, you're in a part of Atlanta that's very ritzy. The other thing is a lot of big cities have draconian gun laws. So you can cut LA out, you can cut Chicago. I mean, Cook County, you can't have gun stores. All of Chicago's gone. I have some customers in New York, they're incredibly restricted. So that's a zip code thing. And you go in a lot of those places, you want customers that want to do good business. That's the other thing. If I am buying something from you where you make no money and it's just sustenance, like I'm taking advantage. And, I understand that certain big internet distributors will have deals that you were never even offered, but that's not going to make or break your business. It's aggravating. But, when they're closing out on something, normally it's not because a manufacturer gave them $1,000 below cost. It's someone from the private equity firm has called down and been like, yo, I just got, the inventory statements or the P&L statements, and you get rid of that now. You figure out at what point someone will give us money for it, and you get it off of our books. And so, I mean, that's the other thing is like, I think that you should, and that's like, there are, when you deal, one of the things we want to talk about was Amazon. When you deal with good companies, you're not going to get caught in that trap. You're not going to get, I mean, there's some good quality companies that we all love and love to buy from. They have strict MAP policies and they want you to hold to it. And, again, we're not going to dog anybody. There was a company that used to have big seasonal sales and retailers used to get really mad about it because it's like, it's below my cost. I'm like, well, when I was in a gun store, we bought on those seasonal sales too. Because again, like we're not in business holding out for Black Friday. We're in business all the time. I'm here every Saturday. The other thing is the person walking through my door has no idea that goes on sale twice a year, nor do they care or want to wait for it. They want it today. And I can install it in their gun. And that's also picking your customers. I mean, I used to have, when I worked in Birmingham at a gun shop, there was this doctor that was looking at a Night Force scope. And so I was walking him through like an ATACR, like 5 to 25 with a trimmer free. I had printed out like from Todd Hodden's website showing him exactly what the trimmer free did. This is why, Todd Hodden did all this stuff. This is what you want to use it for. And at the time, Night Force was giving people like, you sold an attacker in the month of December, you got like a $500 spiff from Night Force. It was ridiculous. It was something huge. So I'm like, I've got this. And I told everyone, the gun manager at the time was like, if that doctor comes in and y'all sell him that scope because either losing the bathroom or at lunch, he's still getting credit for it. So it's like, this was my sale. And so like this guy was talking about ski trips. He would go to like Big Sky or, like Aspen. And I was like, okay, cool. Like you've got enough money. Heard about how much ski trips cost from my friends. Like this is not a make or break deal for me. And he bought it from some internet retailer because he saved like on sales tax because it was time before like they had fixed it. Like you had to pay sales tax across state lines. He's like, yeah, man. It's like, I just, I couldn't pass up saving like $500. And I was like, He was like, can you mount it for me? And I was like, no, you should call Euro Optic and they can walk you through mounting it or whoever you bought. I'm not like trashing Euro Optic. I'm trashing this dude.
No,
like,
but it's the story of like, it's like when you buy it someplace else, you get the service from that other vendor. If you wanted my service, you buy the product from me.
And so like, I kind of get it. If one of my Marine buddies or was like, hey dude, so-and-so's got it on sale and I'm going to save $500 to an E5, especially an E5 with kids, that's a huge amount of money. You should be fiscally responsible. If you're going to Whistler twice a year, $500 ain't shit to you. You've dropped $500 on a bottle of wine at the chalet. So miss me with this fiscal responsibility nonsense. So again, like that's just like, you're not a customer. I don't need you. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care where you go on vacation. Don't ever waste my time again. But I've got a lot of linemen that are like, dude, I'm going to buy from you because I know if this messes up, because, again, everything breaks. If something breaks, I'll hand you a new one and then it becomes my deal with the manufacturer. And that's not something the manufacturer likes. That's not something that anyone likes, but it means a lot more when I'm buying, $150,000 a year from you. And it's like, hey man, I need this warranted and I need it warranted for me. So what I need you to do is take this one, and this one's now going on a SHOT Show demo, and I need you to send me a new scope because I just put another $3,000 scope of yours back on the customer's gun so they can go hunting tomorrow. They don't have time to send it to you and send it back. And good companies like Leopold, like Night Force, they're going to hook you up.
Yeah.
They understand exactly what you're talking about. And that you've developed a relationship with them, and that's the symbiotic relationship you want in customers. So what I see a lot of customers do is they're like, I just can't, you're focusing on trying to get business that was never there to get. Go back to the guys that are doing a good job and be like, hey man, we really appreciate, you bought a ton of guns from us this year. We're going to throw you a case of 9mm so you can shoot some more USPSA matches and hopefully come in 10th place and see somebody that has a Chambers custom gun cook your ass and come back and buy one. That's what we want to see. It's figuring out, and like that's under like marketing dollars. Where to protect your margins is by protecting your good customers and giving them goods.
And that's a good point. Not this year, but the year prior, I was a presenter during the NSSF's SHOT University, and I did a whole educational block on pricing strategies and things like that. It's particularly getting people away from discounting. And one of the points I made in that presentation was the fact that, if you have a product that you have a 35 or 40% discount, it's a 40-point line, right? And so you have those 40 points. So many manufacturers will give you good margins, and then the retailers turn around and hand that margin directly to the customer
for nothing.
Just trying to get them to buy it because they think that like it needs to be cheaper in order to get the transaction. When the flip side of it is, like you said, if you took of those 40 points and you reinvested 20 of those points into marketing, whether it's your ad spend, whether it's little customer appreciation gestures like that, whether it's doing some sort of innovative events at your store to bring people in and kind of make the experience a stickier experience. These are things that people overlook because they're so wrapped around the axle about, oh, somebody could buy it cheaper online. And it's like, well, if I could buy it cheaper online, why did I get in the car and drive to a store in the first place, right? Like I could have just done it while I was sitting on the toilet scrolling through Amazon, right? So there's something to be said for the fact that these people, they're overlooking a major component of the sales process, which is like if you don't charge a high enough profit margin to your customers, you don't have that margin to reinvest into the things for the key customers.
The other thing,
and going back to the story, the lifetime value is everything.
Yeah, they want to buy something. They want to buy it from you because they came in, and you need to create that experience. And of course, they're bad apples, but they're few and far between. I mean, like I use that example, that Night Force scope, because it sticks out. But I had a lot more great customers. I mean, I had one guy come in one time, and unbeknownst to me, I had no idea who he was. He was a massive landowner in the state of Alabama, massive, real estate developer. He's like, man, I need a new AR-15 for my farm. And he was like, what do you have? I'm like, well, we got a nice armament over there that's like really awesome. And he's like, why is it awesome? I explained to him how the bolt's different and the intermediate gas, and it's soft shooting and it's really cool. And, the cool guys use it and stuff like that. And it's a historic company. He kind of Googles it and he's like, you're right. This is pretty cool. He's like, I'll take it. And he's like, what kind of optics should I put on? I'm like, taking it to your farm. I mean, like, this is when like peak LPVO. I was like, I throw like a Night Force tacker on it. I mean, you don't put Walmart wheels on your Porsche Carrera. He's like, no, cool. He's like, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't even know if he knew what he paid for it by the time. I mean, we just went up to the cash register at some point. He handed him his Amex and walked out the door with a bag and a smile on his face. So, if you don't have stuff and you don't talk to people, like, you'll be surprised at how many people are just happy to get good service. The restaurant industry is a testament to that. And also just don't reward people for their haggling bullshit. Like no one sits there at Walmart with their like cart full of shit, like talking to the cashier and is like, well, what if I only gave you $2 for these batteries? They're like, well, you'll go to fucking jail. So you can't have them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you have to, incorporate Walmart style customer service, but you should have Walmart style self-respect.
There's the tagline for this entire call, really.
So you've got to find the happy middle between those two things of, And there's a time and a place. There's a bar, ironically, in Birmingham that I always go to called Lou's. And the owner is a guy named Mike Carper. He's a great guy. He has my favorite brand of customer service, which is fuck you. And he gave me a free drink on my birthday one time. And I would hang out there when I still lived in Birmingham. I hung out there all the time. And they thanked me, whatever. And I never disputed what my tab was. I never, didn't tip them well. And, normally like he'd hook me up. But one thing he explained to somebody, because like some girl had like gotten on to give me a free drink. She's like, Mike, where's my free drink? And he's like, you get one when I decide you get one. It's not your time to figure out when you get a free drink. It's my decision when you get a free drink. So I'm not saying that you can't like haggle with people. I'm not saying, if they're buying, a bunch of stuff at one time, and they're buying it all from you and you're setting it up, that there's not a discount that could be warranted. But I agree with you. Like you're never going to get ahead giving away free money. I think that one thing that we should get rid of, honestly, is math. I don't know why we have like a price that we'd like to get for an item and what we all agree we're going to settle for.
Yeah.
That's a lot less. Like, I don't understand where that came from. Maybe someone who has like more experience in sales can. Like, I know, like it's the lowest you can advertise it on sale, but we really should strive to make good products and inspire people to buy stuff at a line where it now is determined by customer service and performance instead of just who can gut everybody else the fastest to save their own ass.
Yeah, we wrestled with that with our dealer program over the years, which was, I've been selling our product at retail price for now 20 years. And it's amazing to me that the first thing that we'd set up a dealer and I'd go into their store and I'm like,
25% off.
Yeah, why are we, and you're starting with it with a price tag, because that's the other thing they don't talk about is MAP does not typically cover what you put the price tag on it in the store, right? It's just your minimum advertised price. So if you're buying an ad in the local newspaper, or if you're putting it on a meta ad or something like that, well, you can't advertise it for below this magical number. But it's the number of times I've walked into a store and seen products from any company that I know, like they're not selling that at retail. They're not even attempting to get retail for it. And then I happen to know if you bought it from this distributor or that distributor, even if you bought it direct from the manufacturer, that's about a 30 point or a 40 point or a 50 point line. And so I know how much you're giving away just to start the conversation with the customer about why they should buy that one. And to me, it seems like it's an insult to the brand that you're representing, but it's also an insult to your store and your staff that you think so little of what your people, what value you add to the transaction, that you're dropping your pants to have the conversation in the first place.
And I tell people all the time, and this kind of sounds arrogant, but people are like, well, I can't carry this holster line because they don't make stuff for this. I'm like, I will talk people out of using a dumbass light and sell them a holster with no light on it before I like cave. And I get it. If there are people of all different shapes and sizes that have budget constraints, you can stock one or two holsters, or you can stock 9mm ammo. You need to stock 9mm ammo. You also probably are not well capitalized enough to survive in the business, but you should stock holsters. They don't have to be Raven holsters.
Nope.
But you will attract a certain type of clientele. They should be, they should be of quality. You should get out of, because the other thing is when you get above a certain price point, you get out of the rat race of this is what the internet has it for. And this is what, you kind of get out of that. And it's not everyone, but your SIG macros, your regular 365s, and your small frame Glocks and Glock 9mm, you should have a holster selection.
Yeah.
Now, if you sell lights, again, like going back to the X300, you should probably have one for the X300 and some of the Streamlight offerings. You can't be everything to everybody. I think that you should service kind of the TLR7 and the X300. And if they want to, if they've got a special requirement, I know that there's some squat cops out there running X4s for different reasons. I know that, that's probably outside the realm of your retail store's specialty. You should have offerings for those, and they should be good offerings, because there's nothing worse. And this is the other thing the customer will really appreciate and goes a long way. If you get them into a good product, they will remember that long after the sting of the price wears off. I promise you that.
100%.
If they get a crappy holster, because now, I was over at Spirit Systems for an event they had about a month and a half ago, and I was talking to the owner, and I was like, Michael may be the only person besides you that's been knocked off more times, of just ideas. Cause now like it's weird because you used to see other Kydex vendors were making Phantoms. Well, now like you go into stores and all the big brands are making some Eidolon-esque looking garbage.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the people that are making a equivalent quality with the DNA of Eidolon. There are
Right.
several holster companies that I like a lot that make good comparable products with a different flavor. I'm talking about like $35 and below plastic holsters that kind of look like it. But once you start carrying that for a while, once the clips start breaking and the holsters start cracking, those guys like really aren't going to like it. Plus, it's truly a dangerous situation to put someone. So, you will do your customer a huge service by carrying quality holsters for your top selling guns. We all know what the top selling guns are. Sig Macro, 43X, 19. If the only three holsters you offered were 50 to 150 to $200 options, getting into the safari land stuff, for those guns, the people that are buying those guns will appreciate.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, you wouldn't put Walmart rims on your Porsche Carrera, and there's a certain minimum standard that needs to be held. I think, generally speaking, um you're seeing now kind of a trend where your more refined customer that has more specific tastes, they kind of fracture into two categories. There's the people that they buy almost everything they can online, which is why I think we're seeing a lot of brands, RCS included, that are putting a lot more effort into the direct to consumer aspect of the sales process, because at least that way I own that relationship, as opposed to relying on an unknown person at an unknown retailer that bought my product through a distributor. And then on the other side, you have the people where they're like, yeah, I know I can get it online, but I'm not comfortable making that level of purchase from a picture on the internet. And no matter how many YouTube videos I watch about it, I still want to go in and feel it and touch it and talk to somebody and have like an accountable party on the other side of this, rather than just an email address that says my order is confirmed and it's going to ship tomorrow. And I think that like when you realize that the customers fall into categories like that, and you can start figuring out, okay, how do I attract those people to a brick and mortar store? And because once they're there, you have the chance to forge that relationship long term and own that relationship for potentially decades to come. So I guess I want to wrap this up with a little bit of almost like a teaser for leading into a future conversation where we're going to involve our good friend Nick as well, because Lord knows we all like to talk shop about industry trends. But is there anything 2025? I've already kind of staked the position that I think we're going to see more collaborations between companies. Is there anything that you anticipate from either a retailer's perspective or from product development side of things in the industry where there's a potential for the trend to shift in that direction?
My outlook is pretty positive. One thing I will say about the YouTube stuff, and this is the last thing I'll say before I make my predictions. Chuck should have to review all the gear. After you like watched a Chuck gear review, like no one else will suffice. I don't care who they are. I don't care what I remember when I worked at RCS, like I sent out information for white papers on one of the products that were in development. And I opened up all the white, like my job was like, take it back to other people. Sorry about that. Take it back to other people and get it. So I opened everyone's white paper and, there's something here, something there, something there. Chuck's was like 4 pages long.
By the way, let's
So, like,
clarify. We're talking about Chuck Pressburg. Chuck Pressburg.
Chuck Pressburg, yeah. And he was like, this every aspect of how it interfaces with the human being through every possible scenario that the human being would likely go through, and how the product meets and fails expectations. So like if Chuck was reviewing holsters for professionally, YouTube would probably be a great place and we could all shutter our gun stores. But until then, when it's someone's like, I like this, the person likes me, and they made it in the color that I wanted, and you can't buy it because it's like drop merch. So better luck next time, Pours. Yeah, you're right. You're going to have a store where I could come try this on, because I'm just not taking that guy's advice. But yeah.
It's a shame we can't go back in time and grab some of the old basic load posts from Light Fighter in the early days, because those were true gold mines of knowledge.
Chuck and Shane Gillis need to get together, and Shane just needs to riff while Chuck reviews different brands of toilet paper. That's how simple this could be. But for 2025, I think you're 100% right. Nothing else. I mean, possibly 4 of the biggest companies in the firearms industry have collaborated. Ruger and Magpul came together for the RXM. which I will stand by, I think is a great addition to the industry, especially at the price point. You've probably never seen a pistol that is of that quality, that will be that customizable at that price point ever. And then Aimpoint and Glock, giving a true end user. I talked to Jake, actually, Matt Jakelees last week, and he was talking about his interest in them. And he has obviously vastly more experience in agency procurement and law enforcement time. I've never been a cop. I'm never going to be a cop. But, that's really a turnkey solution for agencies. And I think what you're going to see is a collaboration between lots of different ones and maybe companies you didn't expect. Because I think what's going to happen as we wait for either the economy to turn around or stagnate or maybe even get worse, hopefully not, it's going to take the strengthening of relationships through either collaboration or mutual support to get through some of these hard times. And I think a lot of people are going to do it, and the consumer will be rewarded for it. I mean, the consumer is going to get better, more affordable, easier to use stuff. I mean, regardless of, what you did, I've spent, Doug at ATEI did the slide. That's a Acro P2. It's going to go to bin to get stippled. That's just not what the average consumer is going to put out for it. Now you have a real turnkey solution. So instead of buying plates and maybe the guy at the gun store, or maybe you figures out what to Loctite and what not to Loctite and put it together, you have a turnkey solution.
Yeah.
And that fixes a lot of problems for a lot of people. So now we've taken out the engineering aspect of getting an optic on a handgun and you just stick it in a holster. Or you brought optics cut Glock Gen 3 technology down to a price point where otherwise people couldn't afford it. I don't care. I've owned every cool gun, every cool piece of kit imaginable, or more than the average person. There are, nurses, school teachers, firefighters, college kids that deserve to have quality firearms and quality equipment that doesn't break the bank. Not wanting that to be a thing makes you a douchebag. It does not make you an elitist.
Right.
If you want to have like rare and cool stuff while you're at SHOT Show, walk down to the Aria and go to the Patek Philippe dealership and watch how fast they tell you to eat shit and how much they don't care about your life. But for the rest of us on the show floor that are trying to make money or trying to have viable businesses, that stuff is a welcome addition. Like what Magpul has done with their rifle bag line is bringing quality that has never been seen at that price point. It was once reserved to the Cry Precisions and the Blue Force gears, back into the common consumer. The RXM is the same way. And it's a thankless job. But I think in 2025, guess what, guys? The successful people read the tea leaves. They didn't do that. Dwayne and whoever's running Ruger now did not get together on that because they thought it was going to fail. That is going to sell hundreds of thousands of units in 2025. You want a prediction? Yeah. RXM is going to sell a lot.
Well, I think that's kind of the big thing I'm looking at, is like the best part of the fact that 2024 was hard on the industry, and 2025 probably is going to still have some hard knocks for a lot of people, is the fact that it's going to force everybody to go back and actually be creative and be innovative and be better, because it's like now it's the time. It's like be better, get better, or die. And I think that's ultimately, to your point, that's excellent for the consumer, because you're now going to see some real interesting product hit the market, and also the quality of those things are going to improve as well, because they have to be good.
And that's what I think, like, one of the coolest things, I was talking to a buddy of mine who works at the New York Times about like rooftop defense. And I was like, one of the cool things about the firearms industry is the low barrier of entry. You have a lot of smart guys that didn't go to college or came out of the military or did a bunch of like kind of took a different path from life. There's not the gatekeeping that there is in other areas. And, you could start a gun shop tomorrow for, with $20,000. And 5 years from now, if you know what you're doing and you know how to operate it, and you go take some basic business courses at community college, you could be a millionaire. I have several friends that have done it. I know several people that could tell you how they did it, and they would probably even show you how to do it, as long as you just don't do it within 50 miles of them.
Right.
And, so that's awesome. This isn't the tech industry. Nobody's too big to fail here. This isn't Google. So no one's an oligarch or a monopoly. Everyone can go down. And I think for that exact reason, people are going to look to be like, hey, you bring a lot to the table. I bring a lot to the table. Let's put something together. And the consumer is going to be really rewarded for that. Because, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting year. I think there are going to be some people that just don't make it through the other side. I think that, And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I know I've got a lot of customers that were great gun shops. Their kids aren't interested in it. I have a customer in the deep South that's going to be closing this year because he and his wife are retiring. Both of his kids are doctors. They don't want to run gun stores. It's a huge business. He can't find anyone to buy it for market value. So he's going to continue to
Just fold
liquidate
it up.
throughout the year. He's going to shut it down and retire. And that's awesome. I hate it for myself, but he looked at it and he's like, COVID was a nice way to run. Like now that COVID is officially said and I can go out on my own terms, you know, that's perfectly fine. So I think we'll see some people not continue. I think the people that continue forward are going to get stronger and going to get better. And there always will be a growth in the market. There are kids growing up every day that are going to be interested in guns. We are rolling back gun laws. That's something we didn't even touch on that we can touch next time, or you can have someone more talented talk about it. There are a lot of cases before courts that you could see the floodgates open in California,
Yeah.
and that would be insane. Like that
Well,
would
yeah.
be.
We talked to some of our friends at Guardian in New York, where they're having that same thing, where they're riding this new wave of like it's getting easier. It's not like being in Ohio yet, but it is certainly an order of magnitude easier to get into firearms now as a New York citizen, and in particular living in the city to do that.
I mean, I think that some of the cases that are before the Supreme Court, you could see, I mean, like, one of the sad things about the rift in the country is that federally, I think it's getting easier for gun law stuff. And certain states are, really enshrining those rights. For a long time, I couldn't carry a gun in South Carolina because there was no out-of-state permits and stuff like that. They've have constitutional carry now. In some states, you're going the other way, but the problem with that is it's going before federal courts, and the federal courts
Getting
are saying,
struck
no,
down. Yeah.
actually, in your attempt to do this, we are going to come back and undo everything because it seems that it's all unconstitutional. So if there would be a boom, the boom will come from opening up, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm not making a prediction here, but
No, but
someone
that
looks at
would
the
be a contributing
California,
factor.
if someone looked at the California roster and said, "Oh, by the way, this is unconstitutional. They can buy whatever they want, and we're striking this down." California is the fifth largest economy in the world, behind the United States, China, Japan, and Germany. That would be COVID 2.0 for the gun industry.
Yeah. That's